This is a watercolor about a cathedral, and it's a fascinating case study, in part because of the history of the cathedral, and what we learned by studying historical data helped us to understand what we were seeing in the watercolor. The other thing that made this very interesting is that I could not use Google Earth Studio to identify the artist's location because there was just too much vegetation. I couldn't align the image, Google Earth image, with what I see in the watercolor. So I had to come up with another method, and I think you'll find it interesting. This watercolor is by Peter de Windt, and it's titled Llandaff Cathedral, South Wales, and dated about 1848. As I mentioned in the introduction, we could not use Google Earth Studio to identify the artist's location, mostly because of the vegetation, plus the cathedral looks very different today than it did back in 1848. So we'll talk quite a bit about how we were able to identify the location. In addition, we're going to talk about three other things, and these will be quick. One is, why does the cathedral look so different today than it did in 1848? The second is, what is this, what appears to be a landform in the middle of the river that is not there today? And then there's this building that looks like a house. Who owned it? What was it used for? All of these questions will be answered in this presentation. We'll start by showing you exactly what the cathedral looks like today and talk a bit about why it looks so different back in 1848. This video was created using Google Earth Studio, and I want you to notice how the cathedral looks today and also the vegetation that lines the river, which makes it very difficult to see the cathedral today from river level. The cathedral looks so different in 1848 because it had a collapsed tower and a collapsed roof. And they had begun renovation at about the time that Peter de Windt sketched this. That renovation took about 20 years to complete, and then again in World War II it was heavily damaged and renovated in the mid-20th century. And now I'll show you how I was able to identify the artist's location, and also I will answer the question of what that landform is in the middle of the river. What we have here is, of course, an image of the watercolor. On the right is a map of the Llandaff Cathedral and the River Taff. I'm going to identify the artist's location by calculating the distance between the artist and that cathedral in the watercolor. I've done this before in other case studies, and see the video on the watercolor by David Cox if you want a bit more explanation. These fishermen are going to help me to make this calculation, and I'll show you how. But to do this, we need to look at a different map, an older map from about 2 years before this watercolor was sketched. Llandaff Cathedral is outlined with a red box, and notice in the middle of the river there's an island that is now outlined in yellow on both the map and on the watercolor image. Now the fishermen were obviously very close to this island and also very close to the riverbank, so I'm going to mark their location with this white dot on the map. Today the location of both the island and the fishermen are on dry land. The course of the River Taff has changed dramatically in less than 200 years. So let's get back to the process of estimating where that artist was when he sketched this watercolor. And again, refer to the video on the watercolor by Cox for additional information. There are two objects we're going to use, the tower at the cathedral and the man sitting in the boat. We need their actual heights and their apparent heights. The actual height of the tower is 95 feet tall, which is exactly what it is today, and we're estimating the height of the fisherman to be 3 feet from the top of his head to the seat in the boat. Their apparent heights are represented by the length of those arrows, and the ratio of those lengths equals 0.24. The ratio of the actual heights are 95 divided by 3, or 31.67, and if you multiply those two together, you get the ratio that we use in the calculation, which is 7.6. This means that the tower is 7.6 times further from the artist than is the fisherman in the boat. Now this ratio and this map were input into that Excel spreadsheet program to calculate the circle representing all possible locations for the artist. And the location of that circle is plotted on this map. And you can see that it is very close to the tip of the island. And if you look at the watercolor, you can see what the artist is looking at the cathedral right over the tip of the island. So we're going to draw a line there that represents his line of sight. This line crosses a circle in two locations very close to its edge. But because the artist was behind the island, the artist's location is at the intersection of that line with the circle that is also behind the island. And notice that this location is in the middle of the river. So Peter de Windt was not standing on the opposite bank of the river when he sketched this watercolor. He was in the river, on a boat, and very close to this island. So we have one more question to answer, and that is about the house. To be honest, I'm not sure if the house is on the island or if it's on the bank of the river just on the other side of the island. If it's on the island, it probably wasn't a good place to build a house. In fact, it probably wasn't a good place to build a house even on the other bank of the river, because this area along the riverbank was prone to flooding. So I contacted the National Library of Wales, and they had some historical records, some maps, as well as some land use records. And what I discovered was on this plot of land, which is called field number 986, its land use was pasture. There were no buildings on it. The occupier, which was probably the landowner, was Edmund Edward Jr. And the island, it's field number 989, and there also was no house because its use is listed as wood and waste. So this house never existed, except in the artist's imagination. So in this case study, we learned quite a bit. We learned that there was an island in the middle of the river. We learned that there was no house, it was all in the artist's imagination. And we learned that the artist was likely sitting in a boat in the middle of the river when he sketched this watercolor titled Llandaff Cathedral, South Wales.